Terrence Johnson's shift at Save More Groceries started at 11:00 p.m., which meant he had exactly 43 minutes between putting his children to bed and clocking in for 8 hours of stocking shelves in fluorescent-lit aisles that smelled like floor cleaner and overripe bananas. He stood in the doorway of the bedroom his two older children shared, watching Marcus and Zoe sleep. Marcus was 11, sprawled across his twin bed with one leg hanging off the side, his mouth open slightly, his dark skin illuminated by the nightlight shaped like a basketball. Zoe was 8, curled into a tight ball under her unicorn comforter, her natural hair spread across her pillow in a halo of coils that Terrence had carefully detangled and moisturized an hour ago. In the smaller room across the hall, 5-year-old Amara slept in her toddler bed, clutching the stuffed elephant her mother had given her 2 weeks before the cancer had finally won. Terrence stood there longer than he should have, watching his youngest daughter breathe, feeling the familiar ache in his chest that never quite went away. Amara had her mother's face, the same warm brown skin, the same delicate features, the same way of smiling that could light up a room. She would never remember her mother except through photographs and stories, and Terrence didn't know if that was a mercy or a tragedy. He checked his watch. 10:24 p.m. Mrs. Chen from 3B would be arriving any minute. She was 72 years old and charged him $15 a night to sleep on his couch and listen for the kids while he worked. It was the cheapest childcare he could find, and even that was slowly bankrupting him. The eviction notice was folded in his jacket pocket. He'd found it taped to his door when he'd gotten home from the food bank that afternoon, the words "Final Notice" printed in red letters that seemed to scream his failure. Amount due. To the site at 147 Groceries. Pay by November the 18th, or vacate premises, 5 days. He had 5 days to come up with money he didn't have, or he and his 3 children would be on the street. Terrence had done the math 17 times, sitting at his kitchen table with bills spread around him like evidence of his inadequacy. His paycheck from Save More would be $487 after taxes. He had $43 in his checking account. He'd sold everything valuable he owned months ago: his engineering textbooks, his wedding ring, the laptop he'd used for freelance CAD work before exhaustion made that impossible. There was no equation that resulted in $2,147 by November 18th. The knock at the door was soft. Mrs. Chen, always considerate of sleeping children. Terrence let her in, showed her where the emergency numbers were posted, as if she hadn't been doing this 3 nights a week for 4 months, and grabbed his jacket. "Mr. Johnson," Mrs. Chen said quietly, her accent thick, her eyes kind. "You look very tired. Maybe ask boss for night off?" "Can't afford a night off, Mrs. Chen, but thank you." She patted his arm with her small, wrinkled hand. "You good father. Things will get better." Terrence wanted to believe her. He nodded, squeezed her shoulder in gratitude, and headed out into the November night. Save More Grocery at midnight was a specific kind of purgatory. The overhead lights hummed with a frequency that gave Terrence headaches. The floor was sticky in places where the evening crew had half-heartedly mopped. The store was nearly empty except for insomniacs, third-shift workers, and people buying things they didn't want anyone to see them buying during daylight hours. Terrence clocked in at 11:02 p.m., grabbed his box cutter and scanner, and headed for the cereal aisle. He'd been stocking shelves for 7 months now, ever since the engineering firm had eliminated his position during restructuring. They'd been very sorry. They'd given him 2-week severance. They'd wished him the best of luck. He'd had a master's degree in civil engineering from Howard University. He'd designed bridge supports and water treatment facilities. He'd been good at his work, valuable, respected. Now he made $14.50 an hour putting Cheerios on shelves. The night passed in the rhythm he'd learned. Scan, stock, move boxes, repeat. His back ached. His hands were dry and cracked from cardboard. His mind drifted to impossible solutions. Lottery tickets, generous strangers, miracles that didn't happen to people like him. At 3:17 a.m. during his 15-minute break, Terrence walked through the store toward the break room. That's when he heard it. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your card has been declined." The voice belonged to Kevin, the overnight cashier, a 22-year-old with purple hair and a tendency to vape in the parking lot. He sounded uncomfortable, the way people always sounded when they had to tell someone they didn't have enough money. Terrence glanced toward the checkout area and saw her. She was a black woman, maybe early 30s, with rich dark skin and natural hair pulled into an elegant top knot. She wore expensive-looking clothes, a camel-colored coat, designer jeans, leather boots, but there was something disheveled about her appearance, like she'd dressed in a hurry or hadn't slept. Her hands were shaking as she tried a different card. "Try this one," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Kevin swiped it. The machine beeped. "Also declined, ma'am. That's impossible. Try it again." "I've tried it 3 times. Do you have another form of payment?" Terrence saw her face crumble slightly before she caught herself, rebuilding her composure with visible effort. On the counter in front of her was a basket of items: baby formula, children's Tylenol, a package of diapers, bread, peanut butter, milk, and a few other basics. Nothing extravagant, just necessities. The total on the register screen read $87.43. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. "I don't understand," the woman said, pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. "These cards should work. They have to work." She was trying to call someone, but Terrence could see from her expression that whoever she was calling wasn't answering. She tried again, and again. Each time her composure cracked a little more. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but if you can't pay, I'll need to void the transaction," Kevin said, not unkindly. "There are other customers waiting." There weren't other customers. The store was empty. But Terrence understood what Kevin meant. Move along, make room, take your embarrassment somewhere else. The woman looked at the items on the counter, and Terrence saw something in her eyes that he recognized intimately. It was the look of someone who'd run out of options, someone who'd hit a wall and didn't know what came next. She reached for the baby formula, her hand hovering over it like she was trying to decide which item she needed most, which one she could buy if she scraped together cash from her coat pockets and the bottom of her purse. Terrence's break was over. He should go back to the cereal aisle. He should mind his business. He should absolutely not get involved in a stranger's financial crisis when he had his own catastrophe waiting in his jacket pocket. But his feet were already moving. "I've got it," Terrence said, pulling his wallet from his back pocket. Both Kevin and the woman turned to look at him. "Sir, you don't have to," the woman started. "It's okay," Terrence interrupted gently. He pulled out his debit card, the one connected to an account that currently held $43, the account that was supposed to stretch until Friday, the account that was supposed to buy groceries for his own kids. "Ring it up." "Are you sure?" Kevin asked, his expression surprised. "I'm sure." Kevin shrugged and swiped Terrence's card. The machine processed, approved. Terrence felt a hollow sensation in his stomach as he signed the receipt, but he kept his expression neutral. The woman stared at him like he'd performed a miracle instead of making a catastrophically irresponsible financial decision. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "This is incredibly kind." "You don't have to say anything," Terrence replied, handing her the bags. "We all need help sometimes. Please, let me get your information. I'll pay you back. I promise this isn't, I have money, my cards were just, it's complicated, but I'll pay you back immediately if you just tell me." "Don't worry about it," Terrence said, already turning away. "Just pay it forward when you get the chance." "Wait, please, at least tell me your name." But Terrence was already walking back toward the stockroom, his heart pounding with the adrenaline of what he'd just done. $87. He'd just given away $87 he desperately needed. Money that was supposed to feed Marcus and Zoe and Amara. His mama would have been proud. His practical side was screaming at him. His soul felt slightly less crushed than it had 5 minutes ago. Behind him, he heard the woman calling after him, but he didn't turn around. He couldn't. If he looked at her gratitude, at her relief, he might break down in the middle of Save More Grocery at 3:23 a.m., and that wasn't something Terrence Johnson could afford to do. He had 3 more hours on his shift. He had children to feed. He had an eviction notice in his pocket. He didn't have time to fall apart. Simone Castellanos stood in the parking lot of Save More Grocery at 3:30 a.m., holding 4 plastic bags of groceries and trying to understand what had just happened. Her father had frozen her accounts, all of them, her credit cards, her checking account, even the trust fund her grandmother had left her. Gerald Castellanos, real estate mogul and control enthusiast, had finally made good on his threat to cut her off if she didn't stop this foolish rebellion and take her place on the board of Castellanos Properties. She'd fled the emergency board meeting 3 hours ago, driving aimlessly in her BMW until she'd ended up at this grocery store in a neighborhood she'd never been to, suddenly realizing she had a nephew whose birthday was tomorrow and she'd promised to bring supplies for his party. Her sister, Maria's baby, turning 1 year old, and Simone had promised. Promised. Her phone had 17 missed calls from her father, 12 from her brother Carlos, and 8 from the family lawyer. She'd ignored all of them, and then her cards had been declined, and she'd stood there in this fluorescent-lit store at 3 in the morning, having an existential crisis over $87 in baby formula and children's medicine when a stranger had appeared. A tired-looking black man with kind eyes and calloused hands and a Save More employee vest who'd paid for her groceries without hesitation, without judgment, without asking for anything in return. Simone had been raised in wealth. She'd attended private schools and summered in the Hamptons and never worried about money because money was simply there, infinite and assumed. She'd seen generosity before, the performative kind, the tax-deductible kind, the kind that came with galas and plaques and social media posts, but she'd never seen someone give away money they clearly didn't have to spare, the way his hands had shaken slightly as he'd pulled out his card, the way his employee vest had been worn at the edges, the way he'd walked away quickly, like he couldn't afford to be thanked, like kindness was something he did despite the cost, not because of his abundance. Simone sat in her BMW with the groceries beside her and cried. Not delicate tears, but the ugly, gasping kind that came from a place she'd been keeping locked for months. She cried for her suffocating life, for her father's control, for the way she'd been trying to break free and was being punished for it. And she cried because a stranger who worked the night shift at a grocery store had shown her more genuine compassion in 3 minutes than her family had shown her in 3 decades. Her phone rang. Her father again. Simone declined the call. She looked at the groceries, at the receipt with the signature T. Johnson scrawled at the bottom. T. Johnson. She pulled out her laptop from the back seat, the one thing that had been in her car instead of her purse when her father had struck. She connected to the store's public Wi-Fi and opened a browser. Finding people was something Simone was good at. Her real estate work required research, investigation, due diligence. She had access to databases and property records and professional networks. How hard could it be to find one night shift grocery store worker with the initial T and last name Johnson? The rest of Terrence's shift passed in a fog. He stocked shelves mechanically, his mind cycling through the same math problem with no solution. He had $43 in his account. He needed $2,847 in 5 days. He'd just spent $87 on a stranger's groceries, which meant he now had nothing. Less than nothing, actually, once the overdraft fees kicked in. He'd have to go to the food bank again tomorrow. He'd have to tell Marcus they couldn't afford the field trip fee. He'd have to water down Amara's formula to make it stretch, even though he knew he shouldn't, even though it made him feel like he was failing at the most basic requirement of fatherhood, keeping his children fed. At 7:04 a.m., Terrence clocked out, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. Mrs. Chen would be making breakfast for the kids now. He needed to get home, take over, let her go rest, get Marcus and Zoe ready for school, take Amar to the subsidized daycare that cost $40 a day he couldn't afford not to pay. The November morning was cold and gray as he walked to the bus stop. His ancient Honda had died 2 months ago, and he'd sold it for parts, using the $300 to pay for Marcus's asthma medication. The bus took 40 minutes to get from Savemore to his neighborhood, 40 minutes of swaying and stopping and watching the city wake up around him. He was half asleep on his feet when he climbed the stairs to his third-floor apartment. The eviction notice was still there, taped to his door like a scarlet letter. Terrence ripped it down and shoved it back in his pocket, then unlocked the door. The smell of scrambled eggs greeted him. He could hear Amara's high voice chattering about something, Marcus's lower tones responding. Mrs. Chen appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Mr. Johnson, you home? Good. Children are eating. I make extra for you." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. You're too good to us." She smiled, collected her bag, and patted his arm on her way out. "See you tonight, yes?" "Yes, tonight." Except maybe not. Maybe in 5 days there wouldn't be a tonight because there wouldn't be an apartment. Terrence pushed the thought away and walked into the kitchen. His children were seated at the small table. Marcus in his school uniform, Zoe with her hair in the 2 puffs he'd shaped yesterday, Amara in her purple pajamas with eggs smeared on her face. "Daddy!" Amara shrieked, launching herself from her chair toward him. He caught her, held her close, breathed in the baby shampoo smell of her hair. "Good morning, sunshine. Did you sleep good?" "I had a dream about Mommy," Amara said matter-of-factly. "She was making pancakes, and she said to tell you hi." Terrence's throat tightened. "That's beautiful, baby. I bet Mommy misses you too." Marcus looked up from his eggs, his 11-year-old eyes too serious. "Dad, the field trip form is due today. It's $25. Terrence set Amara down and sat heavily in a chair. $25. It might as well have been $25,000. "Buddy, I need to talk to you about that." "It's okay," Marcus interrupted, his voice flat in a way that broke Terrence's heart. "I figured. Jackson said his mom said we probably can't afford it anyway." The casual cruelty of children repeating their parents' gossip. Terrence felt anger surge through his exhaustion. "Marcus, look at me. We're going through a hard time right now, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve things. I'm working on it, okay?" "Sure, Dad." But Marcus's expression said he'd heard this before, and working on it didn't change reality. Zoe, ever the peacemaker, changed the subject. "Daddy, can you braid my hair different today? Aaliyah has beads in hers, and I want beads too." "I don't have beads, baby girl. How about ribbons?" "Okay," Zoe said, easily satisfied in a way Marcus no longer was. Terrence moved through the morning routine on autopilot, braiding Zoe's hair with the purple ribbons she loved, helping Marcus pack his backpack, changing Amara out of her pajamas, making lunches from nearly empty cupboards, sandwiches that were more bread than filling, apples cut into slices to make them look like more. They left the apartment at 7:43. As Terrence locked the door, he saw Mrs. Morrison from across the hall watching him with undisguised judgment. "Shame," she muttered, not even trying to be subtle. "Those poor children." Terrence ignored her and ushered his kids toward the stairs, but her words followed him, adding to the weight he carried. The walk to Marcus and Zoe's school was 12 blocks. Amara rode on Terrence's shoulders, her small hands in his hair, narrating everything she saw. "Bird, Daddy, big truck. That lady has a funny hat." At the school gate, Marcus pulled away from Terrence's attempted hug. "I'm too old for that, Dad." But Zoe threw her arms around his waist and squeezed. "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, baby girl. Be good. Learn something new." He watched them disappear into the building, then adjusted Amara on his shoulders and headed for the daycare 6 blocks away. His shift at Save More started again at 3:30 p.m., which gave him exactly 4 hours to sleep before he had to do it all over again. But first, he had to stop at the building manager's office and beg for an extension he knew he wouldn't get. Simone Castellanos had not slept. She'd spent the entire night in her BMW, researching, tracking, and finally, at 6:47 a.m., finding him. Terrence Johnson, age 36, former civil engineer at Morrison & Wells, widower, father of 3, current employee at Save More Grocery, night shift stock clerk, current address 2847 Riverside Apartments, Unit 3F. She'd found his LinkedIn profile, last updated 3 years ago, showing a professionally dressed man with a confident smile and a Howard University degree. She'd found an obituary for his wife, Naomi Johnson, who'd died at 34 after a battle with ovarian cancer, leaving behind a husband and 3 children. She'd found a GoFundMe from 18 months ago, created by friends to help with medical bills and funeral costs, that had raised $7,200 of a $25,000 goal. She'd pieced together a story of loss and struggle that made her $87 in groceries seem even more precious and devastating. At 8:30 a.m., Simone was parked outside Riverside Apartments, a building that had seen better decades. The brick was crumbling in places. The front door didn't quite close properly. This was affordable housing in a city where affordable meant barely habitable. She sat there for 20 minutes, building her courage before finally getting out of the car. The building smelled like cooking and old carpet. The stairs creaked. The lighting was dim. Simone climbed to the 3rd floor, found Unit 3F, and raised her hand to knock. That's when she saw it. A bright orange paper, official-looking, taped to the door at eye level. Final eviction. Notice, Castellanos Properties. Tenant, Terrence Johnson. Amount. Due, $2,847. Pay by November 18th or vacate premises. Simone felt the air leave her lungs. Castellanos Properties. Her family's company. Her father's empire. The thing she'd been trying to escape. The board meeting she'd fled from. The system she'd spent the last year trying to reform from within while her father and brother overruled every compassionate policy she proposed. The man who'd spent his last $87 on her groceries was being evicted by her family's company. In 5 days. Simone stood frozen in the dingy hallway of Riverside Apartments, staring at the eviction notice with her family's name on it, and felt something inside her crack wide open. She pulled out her phone and took a picture of the notice. Then she knocked on the door, her hand shaking, her heart pounding with shame and purpose and the beginning of a rage that had been building for a long time. No answer. She knocked again, louder. The door across the hall opened and an older black woman peered out suspiciously. He ain't home. Took his baby to daycare, probably heading to sleep before his next shift. Do you know when he'll be back? The woman's eyes narrowed. You another one from Castellanos? Come to harass that poor man? He's doing his best, you know? 3 kids and working himself to death. Y'all ought to be ashamed. I'm not. Simone stopped. I need to speak with him. It's important. It's about... She couldn't finish the sentence. About kicking him out? Making those babies homeless? The woman's voice rose. You people got no heart. That man's wife died, left him with all them bills, and you want to put him on the street? Simone felt tears burning. I'm not here to evict him. I'm here to help. Sure you are, the woman said skeptically. That's what they all say. She started to close her door, but Simone called out desperately. Please, tell him Simone Castellanos came by. Tell him the woman from the grocery store came to say thank you. And tell him... She swallowed hard. Tell him I'm going to fix this. The woman paused, something shifting in her expression. The grocery store woman? You're her? Yes. He told Mrs. Chen about that, about helping some lady who couldn't pay. Used his last money, Mrs. Chen said. Money he needed for his own kids. The woman studied Simone with new interest. You really here to help? I'm really here to help, Simone said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. The woman considered. He usually gets back around 2 crew, before his shift starts, but he's sleeping now, dead on his feet from working all night. You want to help? Let that man rest. I will. I'll come back. Simone turned to leave, then turned back. What's your name? Gladys Morrison. Mrs. Morrison, how many units in this building are facing eviction? Why? Because I'm about to start fixing things. Mrs. Morrison's eyebrows rose. Terrence's unit, the Rodriguezes in 2B, that young couple on the first floor, and the veteran in 4A. 4 families getting kicked out this month. Simone took out her phone and made a note. Thank you. As she walked back to her car, her phone rang. Her father, for probably the 30th time. This time she answered. Simone, where the hell have you been? We've been trying to reach you all night. I need the files on Riverside Apartments, Simone interrupted, her voice cold and clear. Every tenant, every payment history, every eviction proceeding. On my desk in 2 hours. Excuse me. You walk out of a board meeting. You ignore your responsibilities. You don't answer your phone. And now you're making demands. I'm making demands because I'm still an executive vice president of Castellanos Properties, and I have the authority to review any property in our portfolio. Riverside Apartments, Dad? 2 hours, and call off any scheduled evictions. The hell I will. Those tenants are delinquent. We're running a business, not a charity. The hell you won't, Simone shot back, her voice sharp with a fury she'd been containing for too long. Or I'll call an emergency board meeting and bring every news outlet in the city. Let's see how it looks when they find out we're evicting widowed fathers with 3 kids. Single mothers. Veterans. While you and Carlos take home $1 million bonuses. Silence on the other end. You wouldn't dare, Gerald finally said. Try me. She hung up, her hands shaking, her heart racing. She'd just declared war on her own family. She'd just put everything on the line, her position, her inheritance, her place in the only family she had. But she thought about Terrence Johnson, working all night for $14.50 an hour, giving away $87 he didn't have, facing eviction while raising 3 children alone. She thought about the man in that LinkedIn photo, professionally dressed and confident, and the exhausted worker in a Save More vest. She thought about her grandmother, who'd built half the Castellanos' fortune and always said that wealth was worthless if it was built on other people's suffering. Simone started her car and headed toward Castellanos Properties headquarters. She had work to do, and a man to save who'd saved her in ways he'd never understand. Terrence woke at 1:47 p.m. to his phone ringing. He fumbled for it on the nightstand, his body heavy with the kind of exhaustion that 3 hours of sleep couldn't touch. Hello? His voice was rough. Mr. Johnson, this is Patricia Vance from Rainbow Ridge Daycare. We need you to come pick up Amara. She's running a fever of 101.3, and our policy— I'll be right there, Terrence said, already sitting up, his heart sinking. Sick kids meant missed work. Missed work meant lost wages. Lost wages meant the eviction timeline accelerated even faster. He pulled on yesterday's jeans and the first clean shirt he could find, splashed water on his face, and was out the door in 4 minutes. The daycare was a 20-minute walk, 20 minutes of cold November wind and mounting panic about what he was going to do. Amara was sitting in the director's office, looking small and miserable, her eyes glassy with fever. When she saw him, she started crying. "Daddy, I don't feel good." "I know, baby. We're going to go home and get you feeling better, okay?" He signed her out, carried her against his chest, and started the walk home. She was hot through her jacket, her small body radiating heat that made his own body ache with sympathetic worry. Fever meant doctor's visit. Doctor's visit meant copay he couldn't afford, and his shift started in 73 minutes. Terrence pulled out his phone and called Save More. "Hey, Kevin, it's Terrence. I need to talk to Ramon." Ramon Torres was the night manager, a heavy-set man with a mustache and exactly 0 tolerance for absence. When he got on the phone, his voice was already irritated. Johnson, you're scheduled in an hour. I know, my daughter's sick. I need to take her to urgent care. I can come in late, maybe by 6. We've talked about this, Johnson. You've called out twice this month already. My son had an asthma attack and my other daughter had strep throat. I'm a single parent, Ramon. Sometimes my kids get sick. And I'm a manager who needs reliable employees. You come in on time today, or don't bother coming in at all. The line went dead. Terrence stood on the sidewalk holding his feverish 5-year-old and felt the last piece of his stability crumble away. If he took Amara to urgent care, he'd lose his job. If he didn't take her to urgent care, her fever could get worse. There was no right choice. There was only triage. He carried Amara home, gave her children's Tylenol from the bottle that was nearly empty, and laid her on his bed with a cool washcloth on her forehead. Then he called Mrs. Chen. I'm so sorry to ask this, but Amara's sick and I have to work, and I don't know who else to call. I come right now, Mrs. Chen said immediately. Don't worry, I take care of her. I'll pay you extra, Terrence promised, even though he had no idea how. We talk about money later. You go to work. Keep your job. Mrs. Chen arrived 15 minutes later with a bag of herbs and a container of homemade soup. Terrence showed her the Tylenol, the thermometer, the urgent care number to call if Amara's fever went above 102. Then he kissed his daughter's hot forehead, whispered that he loved her, and ran for the bus. He made it to Savemore at 3:04 p.m., 4 minutes late, out of breath and terrified. Ramon was waiting at the time clock. You're late, Johnson. By 4 minutes. My daughter. I don't want to hear it. Ramon pulled out a write-up form. This is your second warning. One more and you're terminated. Sign here. Terrence's hand shook as he signed. 2 warnings. 1 more absence. 1 more late arrival. And he'd lose the job that was barely keeping them afloat. He clocked in and headed for his section, his mind spinning with impossible calculations. No job meant no income. No income meant definitely no apartment. No apartment meant... He couldn't finish that thought. He couldn't let himself imagine his children in a shelter, or worse, separated into foster care because he couldn't provide housing. The shift stretched ahead of him like a prison sentence. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Simone Castellanos sat in the conference room at Castellanos Properties headquarters, surrounded by files on Riverside Apartments. Her father and brother sat across from her, their expressions varying degrees of hostile. This is ridiculous, Carlos said, flipping through tenant payment histories. These people are months behind. Some of them haven't paid rent in over a year. We're not a charity, Simone. Terrence Johnson, Simone said, ignoring her brother and looking at her father. Unit 3F. Widower with 3 children under 12. Wife died of cancer 18 months ago, leaving him with $180,000 in medical debt. He lost his engineering job during company restructuring. He's working night shifts at a grocery store trying to keep his family housed. He's behind 2,047ers, and you're evicting him in 5 days. And, Gerald Castellanos said coldly. That's unfortunate, but it's not our problem. He signed a lease. He's not fulfilling his obligations. He paid his rent on time for 4 years before his wife got sick, Simone shot back. 4 years of reliable payments. He's not a deadbeat. He's a man who got hit by circumstances beyond his control. The outcome is the same. He can't pay. We can't keep him. Simone pulled out her phone and showed them the picture she'd taken that morning. Last night, this man spent his last 87, money he needed to feed his own children, to pay for a stranger's groceries. That stranger was me. My cards were frozen because of Dad's power play, and this man, who's being evicted by our company, gave me everything he had left. Something flickered in her father's expression, but Carlos just shrugged. That was stupid of him. Doesn't change the business reality, doesn't it? Simone leaned forward. Grandmother built this company on the principle that housing is a human right. She bought buildings in struggling neighborhoods and kept rents affordable. She worked with tenants when they hit hard times. She believed that our wealth came with responsibility. Grandmother was sentimental, Carlos said dismissively. Grandmother was right, Simone countered. And Dad, you know she was. You've just forgotten because the money got too good and the compassion got too expensive. Gerald was quiet, staring at the file in front of him. Finally, he spoke. What do you want, Simone? I want a new policy, a hardship program. When tenants face unexpected crises, medical emergencies, job loss, death in the family, we work with them. Payment plans, rent reduction, grace periods. We give people a chance to recover instead of throwing them out the second they stumble. That will cost us millions, Carlos protested. We made $47 million in profit last year, Simone said. We can afford compassion. What we can't afford is to keep building our wealth on the backs of people like Terrence Johnson, people who are trying, people who deserve better. And if they can't recover? Her father asked. If they never catch up? Then we work with social services to get them into appropriate housing. We help them transition with dignity instead of destroying them with evictions that go on their records and make it impossible to rent anywhere else. Simone held his gaze. We be the kind of company Grandmother wanted us to be. The room was silent for a long moment. This is about more than one tenant, Gerald said finally. You want to restructure how we do business because some grocery store worker was nice to you. I want to restructure how we do business because it's right, Simone replied. And yes, because that grocery store worker showed me what real generosity looks like. He has nothing, Dad. Nothing. And he gave me everything. We have everything, and we give nothing. That has to change. Carlos stood up, angry. If you implement this bleeding heart policy, I'm voting against you on every board decision for the rest of— Sit down, Carlos, Gerald said quietly. Dad, sit down. Carlos sat, looking furious. Gerald turned back to Simone, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen in years. Something that might have been respect, or regret, or recognition. Your grandmother would be proud of you, he said softly. She always said you had her heart. He sighed heavily. All right, draft your proposal, present it to the board next month. I'll back it. Simone felt tears threaten. And Terrence Johnson? Rent forgiven for 6 months. After that, he pays what he can afford until he's stable. No eviction. Gerald looked at his son. Carlos will personally deliver the paperwork and write him a check for whatever he's paid in the last 3 months. As an apology. The hell I will. You will, Gerald said, his voice hard. Or you'll find yourself restructured out of your VP position. Am I clear? Carlos went pale but nodded. Simone wanted to cry. She wanted to hug her father. She wanted to call Terrence Johnson and tell him that everything was going to be okay. Instead, she said, There are 3 other families being evicted from Riverside this month. Same terms for all of them. Don't push it, Gerald warned, but there was a hint of a smile. 4 families, Dad, or I'm talking to the press tomorrow. He laughed, actually laughed. You are your grandmother's granddaughter. Fine, 4 families. Now get out of my office and draft that proposal before I change my mind. Simone gathered the files, her hands shaking with relief and triumph. She was almost to the door when her father called after her. Simone! She turned. The grocery store worker, Terrence Johnson. You should invite him to present with you at the board meeting. Let them see who they've been failing. Let them see why this matters. Simone nodded, not trusting her voice. As she walked out of the building toward her car, she pulled up the address for Save More Grocery. She had a man to thank properly, and a life to change. Terrence was stocking pasta at 7:23 p.m. when he saw her. The woman from the previous night, the one with the declined cards, walking down the aisle toward him with purpose in her steps. She was dressed differently now, still expensive clothes, but more businesslike. Her hair was down, her expression determined. "Terrence Johnson," she said. He straightened, confused. "Yes? I'm sorry. Do we—" Then he recognized her. "You're the woman from last night. Simone Castellanos." She extended her hand. "I need to talk to you. Is there somewhere we can speak privately? I'm working. I can't really— It's about your eviction notice." Terrence's blood went cold. "How do you know about that?" "Because my family's company issued it, and I'm here to tell you it's been canceled." The pasta box in Terrence's hand slipped, hitting the floor with a crash. He stared at her, unable to process the words. "What?" "Your eviction has been canceled. Your rent is forgiven for the next 6 months. After that, you'll pay what you can afford based on your income. You're not losing your apartment." Terrence felt his knees weaken. He grabbed the shelf for support. "This is a joke. This has to be—" "It's not a joke." Simone pulled out paperwork from her bag. "It's all here, signed by my father, Gerald Castellanos, CEO. You're staying in your home, Terrence. Your children are staying in their home." He took the papers with shaking hands, his vision blurring as he tried to read through suddenly watery eyes. It was real. Official letterhead, legal language, his name typed at the top. Eviction proceedings canceled. Rent forgiven. "Why?" His voice broke. "Why would you do this?" "Because you spent your last $87 on a stranger's groceries," Simone said, her own eyes bright with tears. "Because you showed me what kindness really looks like. Because you deserved help, and I was in a position to give it." Terrence couldn't hold it together anymore. He sat down right there in the pasta aisle, his head in his hands, and sobbed. Great, heaving sobs that came from a place of exhaustion and relief so profound it hurt. Simone sat down beside him, not touching, just present. "I thought I was going to lose them," Terrence gasped between sobs. "My kids. I thought we were going to end up in a shelter, or they'd get taken away, and I wouldn't be able to. I've been trying so hard, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough." "It was enough," Simone said firmly. "You've been enough. This wasn't your failure, Terrence. The system failed you. We failed you. And I'm trying to make sure we don't fail anyone else the same way." Gradually, Terrence's breathing steadied. He wiped his face with his sleeve, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I'm not usually—" "Don't apologize. You're entitled to feel this." They sat in silence for a moment. Finally, Terrence looked at her. "Castellanos. Your family owns Castellanos Properties?" "Yes, I'm the executive vice president. Or I was. Might be different after today." She smiled slightly. "I had a fight with my father and brother about you, about all the tenants we've been treating like numbers instead of people. We're implementing new policies, a hardship program. You're going to be our first success story. I don't know what to say. Say you'll come speak at our board meeting next month. Tell them your story. Help me convince them that this is the right way forward." Terrence laughed, a wet, disbelieving sound. "You want me to speak at a board meeting? I stock shelves for $14.50 an hour. You're a civil engineer with a master's degree from Howard, who's been dealt a series of terrible circumstances. You're a single father who's working yourself to death to take care of your children. You're a man who gave away his last money to help a stranger." Simone's voice was passionate. "You're exactly who they need to hear from." "I don't have anything to wear to a board meeting." "I'll take care of that. Just say yes." Terrence looked at the papers in his hands again, at the official cancellation of his worst nightmare. "My daughter's sick," he said suddenly. "Amara. She has a fever. I had to leave her with my neighbor because I couldn't miss work. I should be home with her right now." "Then go," Simone said immediately. "Go home to your daughter. I'll lose my job. I already have 2 warnings. Let me handle that." Simone stood up and strode toward the front of the store with an authority that made it clear she was used to being obeyed. Terrence followed, watching in amazement as she found Ramon and proceeded to have a conversation that involved a lot of hand gestures, some firm words about flexibility and human decency, and ended with Ramon looking chastened and Simone returning with a satisfied expression. "You're excused for the rest of the night," she said. "Paid, and Ramon will be implementing new policies about sick children. Apparently he has grandkids he'd be horrified to work under his current rules." "How did you—" "I can be very persuasive when motivated." She smiled. "Now go home to your daughter. I'll check in tomorrow to make sure everything's official." Terrence grabbed his jacket, still feeling like he was dreaming. At the door, he turned back. "Simone." "Yes?" "Thank you for seeing me, for helping, for everything." "Thank you," she replied, "for reminding me why any of this matters." Amara's fever broke at 2:37 a.m. Terrence sat beside his bed where she slept, watching her breathe easily, her small hand clutched in his larger one. Mrs. Chen had gone home hours ago, shooing him toward his daughter with firm instructions to rest. But Terrence couldn't sleep. He kept looking at the paperwork Simone had given him, kept reading the words "eviction canceled," like they might disappear if he looked away. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Simone. Wanted you to know the eviction notice has been officially removed from your record. It won't affect future housing applications. Also, my brother Carlos will be delivering a check tomorrow for $3,200. Refund of your last 3 months' rent. Use it however you need. For Amara's doctor visit, for Marcus's field trip, for whatever helps. You deserve it." Terrence read the message 3 times, his throat tight. $3,200. Money that would let him breathe. Money that would let him take care of his kids without constant panic. He typed back, "I don't know how to thank you enough." Her response came quickly. "Keep being the kind of man who helps strangers. Keep being an amazing father. Keep showing up. That's thanks enough. Sleep well, Terrence." He looked at his sleeping children, Amara in his bed, Marcus and Zoe down the hall, safe and warm and housed. He thought about his wife, about how she would have loved Simone's fierce compassion. He thought about how close he'd come to losing everything. And he thought about $87 in groceries, about a split-second decision to help someone who needed it, about how kindness had circled back in ways he never could have imagined. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Simone. "P.S. If you're interested, my company needs a facilities engineer to assess our properties and recommend improvements. Better hours, better pay, work that matches your degree. Think about it. No pressure. But you should be using that brilliant mind, not just your back." Terrence stared at the message, hardly daring to hope. A job in his field, with better hours, better pay, the chance to use his education again, to be more than a night shift stock clerk, the chance to give his children the life they deserved. He typed, "I'm interested, very interested." "Good. We'll talk details after the board meeting. Get some sleep, Terrence. You've earned it." For the first time in 18 months, Terrence Johnson went to sleep without the weight of impossible mathematics crushing his chest. He went to sleep with his daughter's hand in his rent forgiven, his children safe, and a future that looked brighter than he'd dared to imagine. All because he'd given away $87 he couldn't afford to lose. All because sometimes kindness saved the giver as much as the receiver. All because one woman had seen his humanity when everyone else just saw a number on an eviction notice. The grand opening of the Castellanos Family Resource Center was held on a warm May afternoon. The converted office building now housed a free child care center, a job training program, a food pantry, and offices for social workers who helped families navigate crises. Terrence stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony with Simone, both of them holding oversized scissors, photographers snapping pictures, reporters asking questions about the revolutionary new approach Castellanos Properties had taken to supporting their tenants. Behind them, Marcus, Zoe, and Amara played in the new child care center's playground with a dozen other children. All of them children of Castellanos tenants. All of them receiving free quality care while their parents worked or looked for work or took classes. "You ready?" Simone asked, smiling at him. "To cut a ribbon? I think I can manage." to change everything," she corrected. Terrence looked at the building, at the families gathered, at his children laughing. He thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, desperate, exhausted, convinced he was failing. He thought about the man he was now, facilities engineering director for Castellanos Properties, making 3 times his old salary, working regular hours, able to take his kids to doctor's appointments and field trips and all the normal things parents did. He thought about Simone, who'd become not just his employer, but his friend, his partner in reimagining what corporate responsibility could look like. "Yeah," he said, "I'm ready." They cut the ribbon together, and the crowd applauded. Later, when the formal ceremony was over and they were standing inside the building watching families explore the resources, Simone turned to him. "I have a confession," she said. "Oh?" "That night at the grocery store, my father didn't just freeze my cards. I'd already decided to quit, to walk away from the company because I couldn't be part of what we were doing anymore. I was ready to give up." She smiled. "And then you gave me $87 and reminded me that good people still exist, that maybe the fight was worth it." "So you're saying I'm responsible for all this?" Terrence gestured at the building. "I'm saying we're responsible for all this. Me with my resources, you with your heart. We make a good team." "We do," Terrence agreed. Amara ran up and grabbed his hand. "Daddy, Miss Simone, come see the art room. It has so many colors." They let themselves be pulled away by a 5-year-old's enthusiasm, Simone laughing as Amara demanded they both try finger painting, Marcus and Zoe joining in until all 5 of them were covered in paint and joy. And Terrence thought about how it had all started with a stranger's groceries and a decision to help even when it cost everything. Sometimes the best investments weren't financial. Sometimes they were human. And sometimes $87 could change the entire world. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.